I have this whole idea that Cape Cod, I want to make these shirts that say Cape Cod is a great place to die. I know it's very cynical, but statistically Cape Cod is, like a fraction of itself population-wise in the off-season. The majority of the money on Cape Cod doesn't live here all the time. They make the decisions on windmills, all those things. When you've lived your life and you come back here, it's a great place to come die on the beach, really. But it's also kind of a satire in saying plenty of people are dying here anyways, regardless of a vacation spot.
Kind of view the department as a whole. How many of the arrests would you say are drug related?
Oh, I'd say upwards of over 80%.
Okay. Yeah, because I was trying to.
In one way or the other.
Right.
It doesn't directly, but there seems to be always some sort of link to the illegal drug trade, or addiction, or possession, or what have you when it comes to drugs. Could be property crimes, could be motor vehicle offenses based because they're impaired. Could be family issues, domestic disturbances where the trigger on the argument was drugs or alcohol related. Somebody is trying to confront somebody in their family about their drug use, alcohol use. So,
It's violent.
right.
Around Cape Cod, that you think might contribute to the problem of active addiction around here?
I think that I would have to say that it's like most places in the United States is the division of wealth. There's, I know that I personally, and I know a lot of people, when you think about Cape Cod and you think about summertime, you think about summer houses. There's there's houses around here, just countless houses that are used for 3 months out of the year, and the rest of the time they're just maintained, but there's also the populace that lives here, and a lot of the industry and a lot of people make their money off of those 3 months, those 3.5 months. The rest of the time I see like a really high rate of unemployment. I see people that struggle.
There are some things about the Cape that, describe it differently than other places, but environmental factors kind of get, I think, normalized across the broad spectrum of addiction. I mean, there are certain things down here which people would, point to, like there's not a lot to do. There's, a dearth of options for young people, so they have more time on their hands and they have more sort of likelihood of getting involved in the use of drugs or drinking. But I've been in communities all over, and that's a common theme. As young people often say, well, there's nothing to do around here, and that's one of the reasons why we tend to gravitate toward that. There are some things in this community that relate to family structure, which may be contributory. There's a fairly high percentage of single-parent families where you don't have both parents there. There's unemployment issues, seasonal employment issues. There's I think a level of dysfunction in family functioning down here, which environmental structure, a little surprise is important. The community itself is a fairly benign community here on the Cape. It doesn't have the inner city problems that inner cities have because of population densities. So it's a factor, but there's something larger at issue, I think, here. addiction on Cape, and basically anything else you feel I should know.
Well, I grew up on Cape Cod in a small town in mid-Cape area.
All right, so I lived here from when I was born till I was 7, and then from 7 to 14 I lived north of Boston, in Hamilton, there's also prevalent addiction. My brother still lives there, and he's part of it.
I grew up in a normal household. Mom and dad stayed together. I had a bunch of brothers and sisters. My father worked really hard. He owned an Irish pub and was a vice president loan officer of a bank. So I was kind of born like a spoiled rich kid.
I'm kind of a transplant. A lot of people from off Cape Cod kind of come here and they're referred to as wash-ashores. So I'm one of those people. I didn't grow up around here, but I spent enough time around here to kind of see how the drugs have affected the populace. You know.
Okay, I didn't necessarily grow up here in Falmouth. I was what they call a summer kid. Came down here ever since I was born in the summers. Lived on Falmouth Heights. I graduated from New Bedford High School. I went to Northeastern University after high school. Right after Northeastern, I was hired here as a police officer here in Falmouth, and I've been here 25 years.
Growing up, I remember it being really like it was like we were in our own world, and outsiders would come in and out, and it was almost like an invasion of privacy type thing. And me and our friends, we rebelled against that very quickly. And I didn't think anything was wrong with me, but when I picked up drugs and I started doing drugs on Cape, it was like a time kill thing. Wintertime, it's very boring, you know? And you go in the wintertime and, you can't go to the beach and there's nothing to really do except work, and we partied to kill the time. And being in high school, it was like wintertime in high school. I went to high school up in Eastham, and it's a very rural part of Cape Cod, and it was like, we'd go into the woods and we'd have house parties, and I just took off with it, and doing drugs made me feel better about myself. And I didn't think that I was doing anything wrong. I didn't think it was going to become a problem, but I couldn't stop.
It was more so, I had a friend pass away of leukemia, and that was the first time I ever really experienced any concept of death, and I fell into a depression, and I just started to deal with my depression. I started kind of mimicking things I had seen in movies to make myself feel better. I slept a lot. I didn't eat. I would huff hairspray. I would cut myself, and it just kind of spiraled from there. I went from being an A/B student to I failed all my classes. I dropped out of field hockey. I completely changed all my friends. I started hanging out uptown more, kind of loitering. Not really, I wasn't up to much good.
I didn't really feel comfortable. No, I don't want to say that. Drug use wasn't really like prevalent in my life until I was probably a little bit older. This is hard for me to do. What do you mean? Just talk to you.
My parents split up when I was 14 years old. My mother and I moved back to Cape Cod, and I immediately started doing a lot of drugs. My mother's in recovery and has been since I was 2, so I figured if I did drugs, she wouldn't know because she wouldn't smell the booze. She was looking for booze, so I figured. So I did a lot of acid, and I did a lot of smoking of the pot.
I mean, I think my addictive tendencies started early with always wanting outside things to make myself feel better. My addiction really started though with drugs in college. I went out every single night, clubbing, blacking out, never remember leaving. People thought I worked at nightclubs because I was out so much, but I didn't. I was just 19, and me and my friends thought we were so chic and fabulous, going out every night.
I started, smoking weed, and like most of the drugs I tried, I didn't really like at first, but basically my mentality was like, I'll just keep doing it until I like it. So eventually I did start to enjoy myself when I was doing that. And, it's funny because addiction runs in my family, and I have a lot of family members on both sides that struggle like I did. And basically everybody saw me coming from a mile away, but there's very little, people can do to try and stop you or get in your way, I guess, It came down to I was gonna do what I sought and thought was appropriate for myself at that time. And I wasn't really thinking about larger consequences or down the road, I don't think it's natural for a teenager to be able to internalize the effects of decisions on your long-term psyche.
It didn't take long. I started getting arrested. The police started to know who I was very quickly, got put on probation. I got a CHINS put on me, which is, I believe, now it's a CRA, but it's a child in need of services, where DCF came in. DCF took custody of me. I remained in my home, but they still had custody of me for a long time. And by then I had already started, smoking pot and drinking on every day after school. Then I just stopped going to school. I got a lot into the stealing cough medicine from the local stores, and I was completely out of control. As much as my parents tried to control me, my mother used to have this periwinkle blue Dodge Caravan, and the kids around town would start calling it the Where's Allie van, because she would just drive around and ask everyone where.
So as time went on, drugs changed, and the people that I hung out with changed. I started off smoking weed, and then I started I was doing painkillers, and those were too expensive. So I started sniffing heroin, and then I wanted to find out, all I wanted to ever do was get higher and just numb everything that I was talking about before. When I was high for a while, I didn't feel like I had to believe what was in my head about myself, and I didn't have to think about how I didn't like myself, and it didn't matter. And the people I surrounded myself with didn't matter, and I was in my own little bubble, my own little microcosm of, I don't know, it's like smoke and mirrors,
I went to college, and that was the first time I was pretty much away from home without anybody looking over my shoulder, so I just took off running from there. That was really hard for me because my substance abuse mainly was the stereotypical Jekyll and Hyde. Everything I held on a moral level was gone as soon as I had any substance. So as a woman in college, there's no dignity, no grace. Lots of stupid stuff. I was blackout drunk. Always split my forehead open. I'm surprised it looks as lovely as it does. I just did a lot. It was a lot of debauchery, just to totally not go into detail, but shameful things I would never do day to day, which really, in the end of my my struggle there, was what brought me to my knees. Was the fact that I was living a double life, that I was doing things that I never would do otherwise. And I would wake up and say, what did I do? And I would cry, and I would ruin friendships, relationships. I fought with everyone. I was at the end, I was the kind of drunk that would punch you in the face because I loved you or hated you. There was really no difference. I just wanted to fight. I frequently came out of blackouts crying and not knowing why, and it was because somebody died 10 years ago, and just stupid. And I lost a sense of myself completely. I didn't know who I was. And at the end, I graduated. I was working at a bar in New Hampshire, and I didn't pay for booze. And I think it was the I guess it was one of those grace moments where I knew that if I stayed there, I was never gonna leave. And I would just be a dishwasher that drank every night. So I came home. I came back to Cape Cod.
I got arrested, and the Cape Cod Drug Task Force found it necessary to arrest me for things I was doing due to my drug addiction. You know, what I did was what most of us do, I believe, is we do crime because we need, you know, I needed money. I needed more to get what I wanted to get, because I couldn't live anymore. I was so physically addicted that I would wake up in the morning and not want to get out of bed unless I was going to die, or the pain was so great that I needed to do whatever I needed to do. So I did. And
if you're comfortable, can I ask you what kind of things you did to feed your habit?
well, I sold drugs. I sold drugs on Cape Cod, and I'm not proud of it. I'm ashamed of it, and I put a hole in my community that it didn't deserve. I lived in a very nice neighborhood, very nice people, and I put a hole in this community.
You know, eventually I ended up starting shooting heroin intravenously, and that's kind of where my life really started to take a downward spiral, and really when I started to act in a way that was even like I knew was like inappropriate. I knew that it was against the grain for my morals. I think that everybody has some sort of semblance of morality in their, you know, that they like can understand, like, this is right and this is wrong, and that can be clouded sometimes. It was clouded for me, but I knew that I was really starting to work against my own morality, and it really didn't feel right anymore. And I knew that every day that I was getting high just became harder and harder, and it became harder to cope. And the feelings that I had when I was younger were still there, and now it was compounded with feelings of uselessness. You know, I didn't feel like I was going anywhere with my life. I didn't feel like I had anybody. Like, all the relationships that I had developed when I was younger were gone. People still wanted to help me and see me, but I didn't want to see them. You know, and I tried to get clean a couple times, but I wasn't. I just wasn't ready. I guess it's like everybody has their own threshold of pain, and you know, I can remember, like, shortly before I like really decided that I wanted to get clean, driving down the side of the road and looking at trees and just wondering, like, what it would be like if I just veered off the side of the road and smashed into a tree. Like, if anybody would miss me, or if anybody would notice that I was gone. That's just how I felt, this utterly useless, and that I was just a burden to everybody in my life. And it wasn't even a scary place to be. I wasn't scared. I was really sad and overwhelmed, you know. So I started to see how decisions that I made when I was younger were, you know, affecting me, and, like, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that my life was going to turn out the way that it did, but it's kind of the way that it worked out. And you know, I didn't set out looking to become the person that I turned into. I just wanted to not feel the way I did about myself. And you know, in the end, it was a lot worse than the way I felt initially. You know, so it's like, really, like, the paradox is that it worked for a little while, but then when it stopped working, everything was still there, but worse, you know, tenfold.
I think most of the people I deal with that have been or going through addiction are some of the most honest people I've ever met. You know, usually I'm dealing with them when they're at their lowest, but they'll come out and tell you everything they've done, from their crimes to their family life, and basically are looking for someone or something to get in the way of their addiction and to help them.
With most of the crimes that folks come here for, it's all related to their addiction. I mean, either they're stealing money from family members, or they're stealing money from a grocery store and by way of a robbery or something like that. It's related to the crime, but they still owe society a debt for that crime they committed. So if we can have them sentenced here and let us get them into a program, get them on the straight and narrow, which is a little bit easier for us to do here when we have them 24/7, and then maybe work them back into the community at a pace that's suitable to each individual, I think that would be a good way to help alleviate this problem and show us some success. You know, it's one thing we learn when we're working here in the correctional facility with folks with addiction issues. It's not easy. It's not easy to get straight and sober. I mean, we have people telling us when they're going into the Vivitrol program that, you know, they may have been here for 2 years, but 2 or 3 months before they're ready to get out, they start dreaming about getting high again, and that's just how the brain acts.
You know, before I made the choice to come down here, you know, I was homeless and jobless and, you know, was a thief and stealing from everybody and all that stuff that usually comes along with it. And, you know, like I wanted to die. And I couldn't stop. And I really had no other choice at that point. You know, I couldn't do anything without drugs. So when I came down here, I went through the detox. I went to the halfway house down here. And then I just ended up staying. You know, I didn't want to go back home. I had nowhere to go to.
I had become pregnant again with my second daughter. I was living in my car homeless. I didn't have custody of my first daughter. And I didn't have anyone. My family wanted nothing to do with me. I was barely allowed to see my child, and I overdosed and ended up in a psych ward. And when I was there, I kind of got that spiritual awakening of, I need to get my life together. I need to do this. I need to be a mother, and I can't really describe it. It's kind of one of those things you can't describe until it happens to you. But I got out of the psych ward, went to a meeting, and got clean.
Because I was so lost and so just done. And I woke up one morning, hungover, and I said that I hate my life, I hate myself, I just want to die. I don't really want to die, though, because I'm still here and I'm having this thought process, which is not mine, it's the grace of God. And I went to a meeting because I didn't know what else to do. But I had the seed planted years ago. I knew where to get cigarettes and coffee, so I knew where to get help for a drinking problem, which I wasn't ever ready to do until then.
The only option I saw was like I was going to kill myself. I just couldn't do it anymore. So I had a plan in place. I was going to overdose, and I stockpiled up, you know, a bunch of drugs. Went to a hotel, called a local drug dealer. He came by. As the gears were in place and like everything was moving along for me to you know, end everything, you know, some power greater than me kind of stepped in and took over. I know that's like one of those things that are hard for some people to grasp, but like I don't have any other explanation for it. I was in a hotel, and you know, instead of me dying that day, the police came through the door, not looking for me, but for the guy that I was with. And yeah, like I went to jail. I slept the best I've ever slept. You know, those 2 hours you know, on that wooden bench, sleeping on my shoes. I don't remember much of it because I was, again, in the process of trying to kill myself. I had consumed a ton of drugs and was done. So after all that, I went to treatment, and it still wasn't fully ready to be done, I don't think. I remember being upset when they told me that not only did I have to stop using drugs, I had to stop drinking too, because again, I was going to do what I had done before and like just put down certain substances and go back to everything else. And I'd say like when I got to treatment, I like, it was maybe like 70% of me wanted to go use and 30% wanted to be clean. I just wanted my problems to go away. And over time, like a couple days, it shifted to like 75% of like, I wanted to be, better. I wanted to slowly get there. And I started hearing things of like people I could identify with.
When I decided to get clean this time and really try and put full effort into it, because like I said, my life was at a point where I felt like I really was either going to try and change my life or I was going to end it. I ended up looking for treatment centers, and I came down here to basically to detox. I had no plans. It wasn't that I didn't want to stay here, but I had never been open enough to think about the larger picture of my life and like decisions that I had to make. So I came down here, and I like honestly I kind of like felt inside that I really didn't have anything that was holding me back where I was living before. So I figured that having a new place to start and like essentially like it's, you like I've heard people talking about like getting clean is kind of like being able to live two lives at once, and I kind of can empathize with that, because the way that my life is now and the way that it was before, they don't even mirror each other just in terms of the way that I conduct my daily life. I still know that that's the way it was, and it's strange to think that that's the way that like my life turned to into such a young age. Like I was like 20 years old and I felt that way. I was 20 years old and I felt like I was 50. So I knew that I didn't really have many options. I knew without anybody telling me that I was either gonna like live the rest of my life miserable and like just continue the way that I was, or I was gonna try and change. And I didn't know what that change was gonna entail, but I figured it would be worth trying to change.
I relapsed in December, maybe both. A lot of people died within that first year, so it was really hard. First year of really understanding what it means to not run away from your feelings.
A lot of people in recovery with you, you mean?
One person who probably could have been in recovery, one person who was in recovery, and my father moved away, my dog died. It was like a really bad country song.
But I got out of the psych ward, went to a meeting, and got clean, got custody of my daughter back, had my second daughter clean. I got my GED. I became a CNA. I was working as a bus girl and waiting tables, and I was able to save up my money, and I got a CNA, and I started to work in healthcare in a nursing home. And then I worked there, and then I worked in a community hospital, and then I moved my way up to working. I wanted to come work over the bridge. I wanted to work in Boston, and so I started working in a Boston hospital. And then I worked hard, went to meetings, got very invested in my recovery, and I was able to apply and get into nursing school.
And if I could go back, I'd change it, but I can't, and my life is where it is today because of that. And I've tangled up my legal issues. I'm still on probation. It's been over 2 years since my arrest. I'm still on probation. And now, since I feel like I was such a monster to my community, I give back the best way I can. I try and help other addicts. I work in the field. I do anything I possibly can to like give back and help the community, because I feel like what I did was justified for me while I was doing it, but now looking back on it, I need to right those wrongs. I need to fix those wrongs that I did and the people I hurt. And doing what I'm doing now is the only way I can see that possible.
Like I started going to meetings regularly, I started meeting people in recovery, and surrounding myself with that type of atmosphere. And I really had to put the addiction lifestyle, you know, and like all the things that come along with it, you know, like staying out late night, like going to parties, like trying to be clean, and not going to clubs and doing all that shit. That all needed to come to an end for me. And you know, yeah, I mean, from coming down here and doing all that stuff, you know, I'm able to hold a full-time job and, you know, like keep people in my life, not steal, not lie, and yeah, I don't know. This place is my home now, you know, for right now, and I'm happy with that.
I started nursing school in September. I had my little boy on September 16th. I had class on a Monday. Left class, went and had my baby, and I was back in class on Friday. And I've been doing pretty well for myself. So, I don't know. I went from not even being able to take care of myself and having DCF tell me I shouldn't have children and shouldn't be taking care of my children to being taking care of people's lives and being a single mother of 3 kids and being there for them every day.
When I was in the detox and I really wasn't necessarily welcome where I was staying before. So I basically had an option to go on and stay at a treatment center, or I could find and try and fend my own way. And I honestly didn't even have the energy to do that. I'd kind of reached a place of like an inner surrender, of just listening to maybe other people. And I decided that it would be best for me to go to a treatment center. So I stayed there for a while. And
Was that like a 30-day rehab?
it was, yeah. It was 30 days. I was there for about a little over a month. And then after that, it seemed like the trend was that like there were a lot of people that were going to you know, recovery houses. So I decided I was going to go there. I just felt like living down here was a lot different than anything I was used to. Still feel a lot quieter, and I kind of liked that. So I decided to stay, and I decided to move into a recovery house down here. And you know, it's strange because I ended up spending a lot of time by myself. At that point, I looked at getting high as like as dying, you know, dying again and dying like internal death, and like just letting myself down once again. It's hard because like in order to stay on the right path, and I guess you could say to live like righteously with anything dogmatic aside, it's like there's like hard decisions I had to make as a 20-year-old about like what I was going to have my ideals be and who I was going to surround myself with. And a lot of times I spent time alone because I didn't want to, I no longer wanted to associate myself with the type of people that I was associating myself with before I came down here. So the people that I sort of gravitated towards were people that had already been down here, or people that grew up here that had like found their way out.
I have a hard time believing that jail terms do anyone any good. In this training that I've been doing with Gosnell, this clergy training, I was reviewing some of those materials and came across a statistic. They put a question to us. They said, out of every dollar, what percentage of that dollar goes towards treatment and education? And so we were inclined to say, well, maybe 25 cents to each, 50 cents on the dollar. And the answer was 2 cents out of every dollar, meaning that 98 cents are going towards things like jail, probation, supervision, etc., when it's clear that that's not helping the situation.
The criminal justice system missed the mark, clearly, when we moved towards just locking everybody up and throwing away the key. We ended up adding huge numbers of people who were imprisoned. And in Massachusetts, today, we do not send somebody to jail for possession. It's always because of something else. Or if somebody has so much of the drug that they're clearly dealing it, then that's a different story. But somebody who just has an amount that would be for personal use, nobody goes to jail for that. And that's proper. People who end up in court, who have broken, typically laws related to breaking and entering, petty theft, lots of different, even assaults and up to bank robberies, which are certainly don't fall in the classification of nonviolent. Most all of those people are there because they were trying to feed their addiction by stealing property and selling it to get that, or as a result of being high at the time and committing acts that just don't make any sense. Think about this. Why would somebody in their right mind do some of the crazy things that people who are addicted to opioid drugs do? Why would somebody just break into houses and cars? Why would somebody rob a bank who is in their right mind? And I think it really comes down to the fact that people who are addicts, some professionals feel that they actually lose their free will. In other words, anybody with free will and the ability to exercise it would not be doing these things. So the question really becomes, is the opioid dependence so strong that people lose their free will? They start doing things that they wouldn't do because they can't help but to do it anymore. And I do believe that's part of the equation. So when you look at the court system, people showing up in the court system, a majority of those people are dealing with addictions, and quite a number of them are dealing with other mental health issues at the same time. At the Barnstable County Correctional Facility, 86% of the people who have gone there over the last year have an alcohol and/or drug addiction issue. 90% of the women.
Having jail turned you around is a pretty expensive way to be turned around when you consider all the people it wouldn't work for. I think just nationally, we have super high incarceration rates, which I think is pretty troublesome, when you think about that a lot of these are for-profit run prisons, and locking people up for, doing drugs, I think is pretty silly, I think, I don't know. I know like in Portugal, they've gone to sort of like a, like more of a rehabilitation program instead of an incarceration one that seems to be working over there from what I've heard. Like I'm not an expert. I don't know. I don't think locking people up is really necessarily the right way to go, because you just think about, a lot of, because I've been thinking about, when we were talking about stuff, I've been thinking a lot about like the stigma of being a drug addict, or being a drug user, and what that does to people. And then if you tie on the stigma of, being an ex-convict, it's like, it just seems like an unfair place to put someone, you know what I mean, who hadn't really gone and hurt people or whatever, you know, to have to put on that job application, or just, you know what I mean, to have people know you've been locked up in, you know, in jail, on top of people, you know, judging you for having a drug problem and stuff. You know, it's just, it's a hole that some people can climb out of and a lot of people can't, you know what I mean? And then we'll just stay in that, you know, that cycle, that system, you know what I mean? And I know just in general in life, a lot of times when you're struggling, it's easier to do worse than it is to do better. You know what I mean? So once you have those things stacked up to you, like a criminal history, you know, drug problems, I imagine that makes it even harder. You know what I mean? Instead of like, what's the real problem? You know what I mean? And how do we get to the root of that and fix that? You know what I mean? Instead of compounding it, which I think in some cases incarceration definitely does.
That leaves only 2 to 3 crimes out of 10 don't have a link to drugs and alcohol. But that's largely ignored by the justice system. Now, the emergence of things like drug courts, I think, is a fantastic step forward because the justice system is beginning to comprehend the strong links. The corrections system is beginning to understand. On Cape Cod, in fact, Sheriff Jim Cummings has done a phenomenal job of understanding the role that addiction plays in the people for whom he's responsible. But by and large, I think far too much money is spent on putting people away and not helping people to get better.
The problem is that we don't have better interventions available than often the legal system. And ourselves as parents, we've used the Section 35 more than once and as many as 4 times for our son because he was at risk to himself and he was presenting a risk to us. And that was the only option we had when he would refuse treatment, which was always our first offering. We would do anything to get him into treatment. But the problem also is with treatment. It's not long enough, it's difficult to access, and it's frustrating. The system's frustrating. So sometimes the only other way to go is the justice system. But it's inconsistent the way it's used.
Well, clearly we've never really made a commitment to invest in treatment and prevention and early intervention. So I mean, I think that's it. If we think about this for what it really is, which is a chronic illness, then the prevailing sentiments would be that you want to try to catch the illness, identify it at an earlier stage. What we do basically is we've created a system that is designed to treat patients who have reached a point in their illness where they have to come into the hospital or the emergency room. So if we call it detox, I call the detox the emergency room for addiction. And so there's always a hue and cry that we need more detox beds. But what isn't generally said is that the detox is the ER. The average length of stay in a detox is 4.5 days. There's no chronic condition that exists that would lend itself to remedy in 4.5 days. And with other illnesses, what we try to do is say, how can we identify it earlier? How can we screen earlier? How can we identify high risk? What can we do to sort of to prevent people from progressing to a place where the first thing that happens when someone realizes, oh my God, I got is to go to a detox. So the allocation of funding and the design of the system of care, from my perspective, is a little bit distorted. It's heavily invested in beds, and it's very minimally invested in intervention, early identification, and prevention.
There's really not a good long-term program for insurance coverage for addiction. And anybody who's suffering from addiction, any family members involved with addictions, particularly chronically, know this has a high rate of recidivism, and that is partly due to incomplete treatment and putting addicts out into their communities too soon in the treatment process. It's really throwing them back out to the lions. It takes about 2 years to change the chemically addicted brain. We have treatment programs that insurance will only cover up to 5 days, and then you're supposed to go back out into your community and do 12-step programs. Well, very often in the 12-step programs are individuals who have been ordered there by the court to go and to prove that they're attending as part of probation processes. So they're not seriously into the real workings of the program. And very often people in 12-step programs get together, they find each other, and they leave the programs and go out and use. So we do need longer inpatient treatment and better options for sober house post-treatment, so people have a longer bite into recovery before they're put back out into communities on their own independently.
I think that as a large piece, as long as people have been alive, people have been addicted to stuff. I just think that people in the justice system, they don't know what to do with us. It's everywhere. It's Cape Cod, all over the country. You know, it's really bad around here. But what's the solution to someone who doesn't want help? You know, someone that doesn't want to change their life. And you know, essentially, like a lot of us, it's like for most people, and like myself included, we're deemed that we're not fit to live in society. You know, we're a burden until we decide that we want to start changing our lives. You know, we're leeches, and we're not bad. I don't think that I'm a bad person. I don't think that anybody is a bad person for being addicted to drugs. I just think that it's like it's like a really large fork in the road for me. It's for me, it was either I changed my life or I continue to just be a waste of air.
I think what would excite me most is a dialogue between public policymakers, substance abuse professionals, and the medical profession. I'm not aware of any, and there may be some treatments out there. You know, you can genetically alter somebody's DNA so that they don't like to drink. Maybe, but I think what's right before us, what's possible, what's attainable today, right now, and work that you're doing, Sam, is a big part of that, is engaging those different disciplines to get together and focus on the solution. You know, I remember firsthand hearing a story of a young man who was struggling with addiction and was in Falmouth Hospital and had a blood alcohol content of greater than 0.4, which in many instances leads to death. And so this person had, to recall the story, I think it was a 0.42. I mean, it was just very rare and very exceedingly high level of alcohol in their system. And they spent the night, and this person, then in the morning, the emergency room physician came in to the emergency room and said, "We need you to leave, we need this bed for sick people," and sent this person on their way.
The law enforcement, you know, background from knew what I was about and knew my lifestyle. They never caught me with anything, but every time I got pulled, they would see me and pull me over immediately, search my car and all that stuff. Why wouldn't they? You know, if they know you do drugs, I mean, and I'd be like, they're harassing me. No, they just knew I was a drug addict. You know, they were trying to, in reality, I think help. You know, looking back on it, like you can say, but to stop doing drugs, I think, is getting help. If someone's trying to put you behind bars, or like they're trying to help in like a tougher way, rather than someone just like taking you in. I think an addict, you need to like get fucking smacked in the head. You know.
Sure. That's why a lot of the good sober houses are
very structured.
Very structured.
You know, a lot of. You know, yeah, because if you do whatever you want, once again, if there's no curfew, there's no piss tests, there's no rules, you do whatever you want, just like when you were using, you know.
Any program that relates to addiction has to be pretty structured.
I think so. I mean, if you have 15 drug addicts in one house from all over, all different backgrounds, it's going to get pretty insane in there, you know, all different, like, they all have different knowledge, like different things, and you know, all it takes is one person to have that one wrong idea, and before you know it, the whole house can go down.
Yes, he had Suboxone therapy, both prescribed, and when that ended, he, of course, could buy them on the street like a lot of addicts do. The problem is the Suboxone also became a drug of abuse in that, you know, it was being sold on the streets, and you'd use it when you needed it, and you'd sell it when you wanted what you wanted. And so another problem is access to Suboxone. You know, doctors are limited. You can only have, first of all, you have to be specially trained and licensed to write Suboxone. You can only have 30 patients in your practice at a time on Suboxone, so that limits access. And there are doctors who are not doing a very good job with how they're writing their Suboxone in this community, as well as other communities. The Vivitrol is a depot injection that's given once a month. It's also a blocker medication. The problem with it is it's extremely expensive. It's about $800 a month. Insurance isn't going to pay for it, which is kind of too bad, because if you could use that agent effectively, you might cut down, number one, on recidivism and admissions. So the trade-off is it's a good solution that may in the long run save the system money, but it's not used very often because of the cost. And most families can't afford it. Methadone, I've had a lot of experience with methadone patients, in my opinion. It also became another drug of addiction, because I have never met a methadone patient who ever came off of methadone. They tend to be methadone patients for life, and I don't think that was the original plan. And the same thing with the Suboxone. It was not a plan for people to be on Suboxone for the rest of their life. But again, it's not being regulated very well in terms of use. And I think there's just too many pills on the street, obviously, and I'm not sure where they're all coming from. I'm not sure if there isn't a black market for those now as well.
Oh, you know what might be a good thing? Well, I don't know. A question that we get asked a lot is, if somebody has been incarcerated for 2 years and they're being released, they are no longer addicted to drugs, so why are we treating them? People think that they're not addicted anymore if they've been incarcerated.
If you want to touch on that, sure.
Because, I mean, it's just, it's what everybody asks us.
I understand that, but I guess
yeah.
the layman may not.
You know what, it's exactly right, because if you're familiar with addiction, sometimes you don't think about what people ask. But we've gotten the question a lot, where if somebody has been incarcerated for a period of time and they've been clean off of drugs and alcohol for years, even maybe 2 years, why would we be treating them for addiction when they leave? And what we explain to people is that addiction is not something that is purely physiological. So if you medically detox somebody when they come in, they're detoxed within 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, completely off of a drug. But basically, when they're in an incarceration situation, we think of it as them being on pause. It's we can teach them as many skills as we can when they're here, but they're not able to try them out in real life until they leave here. So it's like if you were in a classroom teaching somebody how to ride a bike, they're still going to fall when they try and ride a bike for the first time. So we explain to them that they're still going to need a lot of supports when they leave. They can acquire a lot of skills when they're here, but they're still going to need some safeguards in place. And as we were talking about, one of them might be some sort of medication-assisted treatment like Vivitrol. And with the biking analogy, we look at that as putting maybe some training wheels on their bike in the beginning when they're let out. So they have a little bit more support so that they can work on, counseling and learning other coping mechanisms of dealing with life and stressors other than using drugs. One of the hardest things is when they get out of here, they go right back to their same old friends, and that in turn leads to the same old ways, and a lot of the time, drug use again. So, sometimes they need a little help understanding what kind of stressors and struggles they're going to have when they leave.
There's hope. There's always hope. It's easy for me to say sitting here, but I see that, and I like to look at things with the glass half full. There's always a way out through therapy, through family support. Hopefully, they get that and they're not stigmatized or totally outcasted by their family, which I could see happening based on their previous habits. You know, a lot of times there's a lot of family breakup based on the behavior of the addict. But I think, you know, once they're able to get clean and get into a program, long-term treatment program, you know, getting clean isn't just the answer. It's going to be a long process. It's going to continue to change that behavioral thinking that caused them to get involved in drugs in the first place. And I think they can be a positive part of society. I think they need someone to give them a chance and not put that stigma on the addict. And that's easier said than done. That might be something we need to address, not so much with the addict, but with society in general, to not stigmatize the addict so much that they can't get back into
People will come around a lot more to understanding addiction when they know somebody or see somebody struggle, or even if somebody's struggle is personally presented to them. You know, like oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name, the Celtics player that was, Chris Herron. I think a lot of people might have had their addiction views maybe changed by that, because that's showing that it's, you know, blind to populations, and it can affect anybody. And people can, I think, look at that story and relate to parts of it. And I think that helps a lot with the stigma.
In one of the facilities I'm at, they have these things called grand rounds, which doctors present cases, patient cases that they particularly not bother them, but they found interesting or whatever, and they bring it up at this conference with a bunch of medical professionals, PT, OT, doctors, pharmacists, and I happened to be able to sit in with one of these as my nursing class we all did, and it happened to be on addiction. And it happened to be about these two addicted patients, and I listened to this, you know, this room full of medical professionals basically bash addicts. And doctors saying, you know what, it's not my problem, this person needs to go somewhere else to, you know, manage their treatment, and it's not my problem is basically what a lot of these medical professionals were. You know, this patient happened to lie to them, and it was such a mess listening to these people. And then it became like an open floor, and I raised my hand and I said that I was an addict and that I was appalled by what they were saying. And I said that, you know, our attitudes can go a long way with treating people and how we treat people and the effectiveness of that treatment. And all of a sudden, all these people started kind of raising their hands and coming out and standing up for addicts and saying that these people deserve a chance and we need to take responsibility with how we treat them in their treatment plan and continuing their plan. And it was amazing, the transformation in the room, just by me saying, hey, I'm an addict and I'm sitting right here. And that, you know, you never know who an addict is. It could be someone's mother, brother, sister, cousin. So we really do need to start treating them fairly and breaking that stigma and, you know, kind of empathizing with them more, because the effectiveness of our attitudes when helping people is going to go a long way.
Hollow bones and hollow veins and choking in this town where they talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Oh, they talk and 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 talk.